Long Island medium Theresa Caputo's son-in-law, Victoria Caputo's husband, recently kicked Theresa out of his house after insulting her. He made it clear, "You're never coming to my house again. Take your daughter if you have to, but I don't want to see your face again." He added, "You and your daughter Victoria have fooled me a lot, but not this time." Theresa Caputo had always believed that love, like spirit connections, could overcome anything. But even her strongest intuitions hadn't warned her about the storm brewing in her own family. It all happened one rainy evening. Theresa had gone to visit her daughter Victoria and son-in-law, Daniel, hoping for a cozy family dinner. Spirits had whispered to her that the night would be emotional, but she had thought it would be tears of joy, not heartbreak. Tension filled the room the moment Theresa stepped inside. Daniel's face was tight with anger, his eyes cold. Halfway through dinner, he slammed his fork down and stood up. "I've had enough," he said sharply. "You're never coming to my house again." The room fell into stunned silence. Theresa blinked, confused. Victoria's hands trembled slightly. "If you want," Daniel added, voice rising, "take your daughter with you. But I don't ever want to see your face here again." Theresa tried to speak, but Daniel cut her off. "You and Victoria have fooled me too many times. Your games, your manipulation. Not this time. I'm done." Victoria's eyes welled with tears as Theresa slowly rose from her chair, her heart breaking. She hadn't seen this betrayal coming, not from someone she had welcomed into her family, into her life. Without a word, Theresa turned and walked toward the door. Before stepping out into the pouring rain, she paused. "Spirits teach us that sometimes the greatest wounds come from those we love the most," she said quietly. "But they also teach us that healing begins when the truth is revealed." The door closed behind her with a heavy thud, and for the first time in years, Theresa Caputo wasn't sure if the bridge between her and her daughter's world could ever be rebuilt. However, it was a crisp autumn afternoon when Rosie O'Donnell agreed to meet Theresa Caputo, the famed Long Island medium, for a private session. Rosie, skeptical yet curious, entered the cozy room adorned with candles and photographs of smiling families. She wasn't sure what to expect. Part of her believed, part of her doubted, but she was open. Theresa, vibrant and warm as ever, welcomed Rosie with a hug. She could already feel the buzzing energy in the room. Spirits were eager. As they sat down, Theresa's face grew serious. She closed her eyes briefly, as if tuning into a distant frequency. "Rosie," Theresa began softly, "I keep hearing the name Daniel. Who is Daniel to you?" Rosie's breath hitched. Daniel was her late brother, who had passed away when they were teenagers, a loss Rosie rarely spoke about, even to her closest friends. Tears welled up in Rosie's eyes as Theresa continued. "He's showing me a baseball glove. He says you used to practice with him even though you hated it." Rosie laughed through her tears. "I did. I was terrible at it." Theresa smiled. "He says you were terrible, but you did it because you loved him." The room grew heavier with emotion. Theresa leaned closer. "He wants you to know he's never left your side. Every time you feel that sudden warmth, or hear that song on the radio that makes no sense, it's him. He's still your biggest fan." Rosie broke down, sobbing openly now, feeling a mix of pain, joy, and overwhelming love. In that moment, all skepticism melted away. She felt Daniel's presence as if he were right there, sitting beside her. After the session, Rosie hugged Theresa tightly, whispering, "Thank you for giving me my brother back, even if just for a moment." Outside, the golden autumn leaves danced in the wind, carrying whispers of love across the Long Island sky. However, it was a quiet afternoon when Theresa Caputo, the Long Island medium, arrived at the small, cozy home tucked away near the shore. The air was thick with emotion. A family had reached out, desperate for a message from the other side. As Theresa settled in, she closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Instantly, she felt a vibrant energy, playful, loving, and pure. She smiled softly and spoke. I keep hearing giggles. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7. He had such a big heart. I feel like he had Down syndrome, she said gently. The mother sitting across from her broke down in tears, nodding. That's our Noah, she whispered. He drowned last summer at the beach. We never got to say goodbye. Theresa placed her hand over her heart. He's showing me the ocean, but he's not scared. He's laughing, splashing, and he's safe. He wants you to know it wasn't your fault. He says, Mommy, I was happy. I wasn't afraid. The room filled with an overwhelming sense of peace. Theresa continued, he's handing me a seashell. He says he leaves them for you. Have you been finding shells lately, ones that seem out of place? The mother sobbed, pulling a small white shell from her pocket. I found this on my porch yesterday, nowhere near the beach. That's him, Theresa said with a warm smile. He's still with you. He loves you bigger than the ocean. He says, don't cry, Mommy, I'm still your sunshine. For the first time in months, the family felt their heavy grief lift, replaced by an undeniable sense of love, a whisper from the waves, carried across time and space by a little boy who would forever be their angel. However, Theresa Caputo always knew she was different. Growing up in Hicksville, Long Island, she would often feel soft whispers brushing against her ears when no one was around. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but as the years went by, the voices grew stronger, clearer, and impossible to ignore. By the time she became the star of the TLC show Long Island Media had embraced her gift, the ability to communicate with spirits. Her life was a whirlwind of emotions, laughter, and tears as she helped families find peace, connecting them with loved ones who had crossed over. One evening, after filming a particularly intense session, Theresa decided to take a walk along the beach. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and gold, and the ocean whispered secrets to the shore. As she walked, she felt a sudden chill and the familiar tingling sensation on the back of her neck. A spirit was near. Theresa, a soft voice called. She turned but saw no one. Closing her eyes, she focused on the energy around her. A faint, glowing figure emerged. A young woman in a flowing white dress. Tears shimmered in the spirit's eyes. My name is Lily, the spirit whispered. I never got to say goodbye. Theresa's heart ached. She sat in the sand, allowing the spirit's sorrow to pour into her. Lily spoke a life cut short and a mother still waiting, heartbroken and lost. The next day, guided by intuition, Theresa drove to a quiet neighborhood she had never visited before. She found a small house with a weathered porch and an elderly woman tending to a rose garden. Theresa approached gently and introduced herself. Within moments, tears flowed freely. The woman was Lily's mother, who had been waiting decades for a sign that her daughter was at peace. Through Theresa's words, laughter, and tender memories, a lifetime of grief began to heal. As Theresa left the house, she looked up at the sky and smiled. Her gift was not a burden, but a bridge, a whispering light between two worlds. However, Theresa Caputo, the famed Long Island medium, had just finished a long day of private sessions when a letter caught her eye. It was from a grieving mother named Helen, whose son Jason had been tragically killed in a random shooting a year ago. Helen wrote that she hadn't been able to find peace and desperately needed a sign that her son was okay. Feeling a deep pull, Theresa agreed to meet Helen privately at her cozy home on Long Island. When Helen opened the door, her eyes were heavy with sadness, her hands trembling slightly as she led Theresa inside. As soon as Theresa stepped into the living room, she felt a strong, overwhelming energy. She closed her eyes for a moment and then said, "Your son is already here, Helen. He's standing right behind you." Helen gasped, tears immediately filling her eyes. Theresa smiled warmly and continued, "He's showing me a baseball glove. Did he love playing baseball?" Helen nodded, clutching her chest. Baseball was his world. Theresa relayed Jason's messages. He wanted his mother to know that he was no longer in pain. that the last thing he felt was love, not fear. He also showed Theresa a red balloon, which confused Helen, until she remembered how she had released a red balloon at his funeral. "He caught it, Helen," Theresa said gently. "He wants you to know he got your message." Sobbing, Helen felt a wave of relief wash over her for the first time in months. The grief didn't disappear, but now it was accompanied by a comforting warmth, a feeling that Jason was still close. As Theresa prepared to leave, she turned back and smiled. "He says he's proud of you, and every time you see a red balloon or hear his favorite song, that's him reminding you he's still with you." Helen stood at the door, watching Theresa disappear down the street, feeling like a tiny piece of her shattered heart had finally started to heal. However, it was a chilly December evening in Hicksville, Long Island. Fairy lights twinkled on every house, and the smell of cinnamon and pine filled the air. Theresa Caputo, the famous Long Island medium, was hosting a special holiday event at the town's community center called Channeling the Holiday Spirit. Families gathered, some carrying plates of cookies, others clutching tissues, hopeful to hear from loved ones on the other side. Theresa, with her signature big blonde hair and warm smile, took the stage, a glowing Christmas tree behind her. "I feel a strong energy in the room tonight," she said, her hands fluttering. "Someone's grandma is here. She's wearing a red apron and keeps mentioning gingerbread cookies." A woman gasped from the audience. "That's my Grandma Ruth. She baked gingerbread every Christmas." Theresa smiled warmly. "She wants you to know she's proud you're keeping the tradition alive. And she's laughing about how you still can't get the frosting right." The room erupted in laughter and tears. One by one, Theresa connected families with messages of love, hope, and sometimes playful teasing from the spirits. But then, something unusual happened. Theresa paused, her face softening. "I'm getting a strong feeling. Someone here is about to experience a Christmas miracle." A young man in the back raised his hand hesitantly. He had been searching for his father, who had disappeared when he was a child. Suddenly, Theresa turned to him. "Your father says he's been with you all along. He's guiding you. And he says you'll find what you've been looking for by Christmas Eve, but you have to trust." Skeptical but hopeful, the young man left the event feeling lighter. On Christmas Eve, following a strange feeling, he stopped by a local diner, and there, sitting at the counter, was an old family friend who had news about his father. It turned out his father had been alive all these years, living just a few towns over. Their reunion was bittersweet but filled with love, just as Theresa had channeled. Back at the community center, Theresa lit a single candle by the Christmas tree, whispering a prayer for everyone missing someone during the holidays. And in that small Long Island town, that Christmas became one no one would ever forget, where spirits, love, and a little bit of holiday magic filled the air. However, it was an ordinary Saturday morning at Bella's hair salon in Long Island. The scent of hairspray, fresh coffee, and shampoo filled the air. Theresa Caputo, the famous Long Island medium, had come in for a quick haircut before her afternoon show. While waiting, Theresa couldn't help but feel a strong spiritual energy around a woman sitting nearby. The woman, a middle-aged lady named Karen, was nervously flipping through a magazine as she waited for her color treatment. Theresa walked over, her platinum blonde hair bouncing as she moved. "Hi, honey," she said warmly. "I don't mean to interrupt, but your mother's spirit is coming through loud and clear." Karen's eyes widened. "My mother?" she whispered. Theresa nodded. "She's showing me a pair of red roses, and she keeps saying, 'Tell my girl I'm proud of her. Were you just thinking about her this morning?'" Karen's hands shook. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I was," she said. "Today is her birthday. She passed away 5 years ago." Everyone in the salon grew quiet, watching the exchange in awe. Theresa smiled gently. "She's been with you every step of the way, especially when you started your new business. She says she's your biggest cheerleader." Karen sobbed softly, covering her mouth. I opened my bakery last month. It was her dream too. Theresa squeezed her hand. She knows, honey, she's so proud. The whole salon buzzed with emotion. Even Bella, the owner, wiped away a tear. What started as a simple haircut appointment turned into a moment of healing that no one in that salon would ever forget. However, it was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon at a small coffee shop in Huntington, Long Island. The rain tapped softly against the windows as a handful of customers sipped their lattes and scrolled through their phones. Among them sat Emily, a young woman in her late 20s, quietly journaling by the window. Suddenly, the door swung open, and in walked a familiar figure. Big blonde hair, perfectly manicured nails, and a magnetic presence. It was Theresa Caputo, the Long Island medium herself. Everyone turned to look, but Theresa just smiled warmly and ordered a cappuccino. She seemed content to wait by the counter, but then her eyes were drawn to Emily. Theresa's face shifted, a look Emily had seen on TV many times before, a knowing expression, like she had just tuned into a radio station no one else could hear. Theresa walked over to Emily's table cautiously. "Hi, sweetheart," she said with that unmistakable Long Island accent. "I don't mean to interrupt, but your grandfather is coming through very strong for me." Emily's eyes widened. She hadn't even seen Theresa walk in, and now she was standing right in front of her, talking about her late Grandpa Joe. "He keeps showing me a pocket watch," Theresa continued. "Says you keep it in your drawer, but you're afraid to wear it because it's old." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. It was true. She had her grandfather's antique pocket watch tucked away, afraid it might break if she used it. And he's saying, "Stop worrying, Em. It's meant to be part of your life, not hidden away." Theresa smiled gently. "He wants you to carry it with pride." Emily was stunned. She hadn't even thought about Grandpa Joe that morning, but now memories flooded back, fishing trips, his deep laugh, the way he always checked his old watch whenever he said it was time for ice cream. The coffee shop had fallen completely silent. Even the baristas stood still, watching the moment unfold. Emily wiped her eyes and laughed through her tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't even know I needed this today." Theresa squeezed her hand warmly. "Sometimes spirit knows what we need before we do," she said with a wink. With that, she picked up her coffee, gave a little wave, and disappeared back into the rainy afternoon, leaving behind a room full of wide-eyed witnesses and one heart a little lighter than before. Hello lovely viewers, welcome to my channel. I am Mina. Hope your day is so well. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe the channel.